what Ms. Lofgren said before, and thank Ms. Jayapal for kicking us off by giving us the students' view of this. And Ms. Lofgren talked about the economy. And I thought I'd just say a word about the academic, institutional perspective on this, because I was, you guys know, I was a law professor for a long time, but I was also a dean for a while. And the international students are a really critical force in the school, intellectually and socially and culturally, but also financially. And I just looked it up. There were 1.2 million foreign students in America last year, contributing more than $42 billion to the American economy. You know, I think we take it for granted that everybody loves America. They love our music, they love our movies, they love our culture, they love the openness and boundlessness of this society. But if we keep sending messages of hostility and indifference to people's rights, and we start getting the word out there that we're a closed society and we're not interested anymore in getting people from around the world, we're going to see those numbers slide really quickly. And this is not just in blue states and blue districts. We've got universities and colleges all over the land who are going to suffer if we send the message to foreign students that they're not welcome here, or we could yank their chains if we don't like the way they think or what they speak or what they're doing, or if we just decide to start messing around with them. So I'm into big, open, boundless America. I want an America that invites people in. And the chairman and I have always talked about the First Amendment being speech and counter speech and let 1,000 flowers bloom. And that should be our approach, as opposed to cracking down on students for no real reason. So
Would
thank you.
the gentleman yield?
It's no longer my time.
Oh.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly emphasize how important that point was, because there are already people that have contacted me telling me that they are choosing to abandon their research projects here, that they don't want to come to school here, that they're going to go to Germany. They're being courted by people all over the world, and they're abandoning the idea of coming to America precisely because of what they see happening. I yield. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has
Mr.
expired.
Chairman.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I want to build on what Ms. Jayapal just said about students not wanting to be here. The United States has been dominant economically because of our dominance scientifically. But that wasn't always true. At the beginning of the last century, in 1900, 36% of the Nobel Prizes in science went to Germany. About 20% went to England, 6% went to the United States. That got reversed by three developments. First, Hitler. Hitler chased out the Jews. The Jews were 1% of the German population, but about 40 or 50% of the German scientists. And those people, like Albert Einstein and a lot of other people, came here because this was a place of refuge. Secondly, World War II. World War II left everybody else decimated. The United States was the only country that wasn't decimated. And a decision was made by the United States government in 1945, a very intelligent decision, to invest in research. For the government to invest in research and not dictate it. We would invest billions of dollars, give it to the universities with no strings attached, and expect that eventually the society would be paid back in scientific progress and prosperity. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. And now where are we? Now the Trump administration is reversing that. They're making the foreign students, we always had foreign students come here. Chinese students came here and still do. And they get trained here. And a lot of them stay here and contribute to our economy. Now, the Trump administration is making foreign students feel unwelcome. And China is doing everything to bring them to China. And China will end up where we are, dominant where we are now, but won't be very much longer. They will be dominant in science, they will be dominant in technology, and they will be dominant in military power because of the science and the technology. So we are making a very, very bad mistake. And the gentlelady's amendment would go some way toward reversing this mistake. And I certainly hope we adopt it, because this country, we want this country to stay prosperous. We want it to stay strong. And we don't want it to be subservient to China. And we don't want our prosperity to go away because we have to pay through the nose for Chinese technology and products. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment from the gentlelady from North Carolina. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Gentlelady requests a roll call vote. The clerk call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa?
Okay. So
Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgardner? Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Aye.
Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett? Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. Issa, you're not recorded. Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald, you're not recorded. Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Schmidt votes no.
clerk report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 15 ayes and 20 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Now, who seeks recognition? The gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Gentleman from Arizona reserves.
Amendment to the
Without
amendment.
objection, the amendment be considered as read. The gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to keep this brief. I know we've been here a long time, but my amendment is simple. None of the funds made available by this subtitle may be used by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain or remove an alien under Section 237A(4)(c) of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Mr. Chair, on April 14th, Mohsin Madawi, a green card holder and Vermont resident for over a decade, entered a local U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services office for what was supposed to be his last citizenship interview. Instead, he was arrested and detained by masked, hooded agents and taken into an unmarked vehicle. It was all a setup. He was lured there under the guise of it being the last step in his citizenship process. He followed all the rules, and yet it didn't matter.
Mahmoud Khalil, another green card holder, was snatched away in front of his pregnant wife and sent away to an ICE detention facility in Louisiana, hundreds of miles away from his family and home in New York. These abductions are the stuff of authoritarian nightmares, straight from the book of dictators. The underhanded and deceitful nature of Mohsen's arrest is an affront to the values of fairness and decency. It's against our Constitution. It's un-American. The Trump administration has twisted a Cold War era statute to deport individuals because of their protected views and their protected speech. Yesterday, I led my colleagues in demanding Mohsen's release in front of the State Department. And this morning, we were elated to hear that a federal judge has ordered his release on bail, saying that, quote, 2 weeks of detention so far demonstrate great harm to a person who has been charged with no crime. Today, I offer this amendment to ensure that no taxpayer dollars are used for illegal abductions. The administration is relying on vague language in the Immigration and Nationality Act to claim that Mr. Madawi and Mr. Khalil's speech related to Israel and Palestine has somehow had adverse foreign policy consequences on the United States. But no one has provided any evidence of the adverse foreign policy consequences resulting from Mohsen's or Mahmoud's speech in support of peace. And the Trump administration does not allege that either person has committed a crime. They have not been charged with a crime. The Constitution guarantees the right to speak freely without fear or retribution from our government. This right belongs to everyone on American soil. Donald Trump and his enablers are attacking the rule of law under the guise of immigration enforcement. Whether or not you agree with the political views of Mahmoud or Mohsen, their kidnappings should terrify you. We, Congress, we have a duty to act. We must take action to stop this administration from silencing us. I'm not going to stay silent. I know my colleagues on this side of the aisle are not going to stay silent. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to hold this administration accountable for these illegal kidnappings. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Question occurs on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
there is a very great federal judge named Marianne Trump Berry who declared this section to be unconstitutional on its face. And it, of course, is hopelessly vague and overly broad. And so it basically indulges in every particular First Amendment sin. And I think we're seeing today the danger of having a provision like this on the books. I think Judge Trump Berry had it right. It is unconstitutional on its face. And, as we've often said, this shouldn't be about trying to judge the underlying speech. It should be taking a principled approach to the First Amendment and people's right to speak in the country. And so I strongly favor this amendment, and I hope we can all
The
support it.
gentleman yield for a question?
Yes, by all means.
Is Judge Trump Barry by any chance related to the president?
Oh, there's that. Marianne Trump
I
Berry.
believe
Yeah.
she's his sister.
Yeah, I think that might be President Trump's sister, and a very fine judge indeed. All right, I yield back to you, Mr.
Despite her
Chairman.
brother. Yes.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Vermont. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And the amendment is not agreed to.
Could we have a recorded vote on that, please?
Recorded vote requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgardner? Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Aye.
Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes yes. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett? Ms. Crockett votes aye. Ms. Ross, you're not recorded. Ms. Ross votes aye. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Chairman, there are 15 ayes and 19 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Illinois is
Chairman,
recognized.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by gentleman from Arizona.
Amendment to the amendment in the
Without
nature.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment is simple. It says that ICE cannot use funds in this bill to conduct civil immigration enforcement actions at houses of worship. For 30 years, presidents of both parties restricted ICE from conducting immigration raids at sensitive locations like churches and schools. A recent poll showed that 2/3 of Americans oppose raids at houses of worship. But when Trump took office for a second time, he reversed this policy. Several ICE raids at or near churches followed shortly after. These actions have sowed fear in many religious communities, particularly Christian communities. Some churches have even moved their services online because people fear going in person. I've listened to my Republican colleagues talk about faith. Many of them frequently emphasize their commitment to Christianity and other religions. So I would ask, how does ICE raids at houses of worship advance freedom of religion? And it reminds me of the late Pope Francis, who urged us to, and I quote, give in to narratives that discriminate against and cause unnecessary suffering to our migrant refugee brothers and sisters. So he urged us not to give into that. I urge my colleagues to respect the freedom of religion, to respect houses of worship, and to support this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Gentlelady from Vermont requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman. Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott. Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder. Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner. Mr. Raskin. Mr. Nadler.
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren.
Yes.
Ms. Lofgren votes yes. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell. Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu. Ms. Jayapal. Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa. Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse. Ms. McBath. Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross. Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant.
Aye.
Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove. Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz. Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett. Ms. Crockett votes yes. Mr. Raskin, you're not recorded. Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Gooden votes no.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 16 ayes and 18 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order from the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in the
Without
nature.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is simple. My amendment would prohibit funding to hire anyone who participated in the January 6th attack, even if pardoned. It applies to all DHS hiring under the Judiciary Reconciliation title. You cannot break into the Capitol, beat police officers, and then apply for a government job enforcing immigration law. Full stop. This amendment is about protecting the integrity of our institutions. DHS employees wield enormous power, and that power should never be in the hands of someone who tried to destroy democracy, tear up the Capitol, assault Capitol police officers who are law enforcement. Those should be disqualifying factors, in fact, for working for DHS. Pardon or no pardon, there should be consequences for such dangerous and anti-democratic behavior. These individuals are a national security risk. They demonstrated that they are willing to use violence to overturn lawful elections. And we are not saying that people can never rebuild their lives, but we are saying that they cannot rebuild them on the federal payroll, enforcing laws they once tried to nullify by force. Hiring insurrectionists to enforce federal law is not rehabilitation. It is a betrayal of democracy, and it is unsafe for people, including Americans and citizens, especially those you just voted to detain, deport, have seized, and kidnapped, and not returned. So why should we vote for this simple amendment? Well, one of these people is in fact an alleged sex offender. And while alleged is an important word, taking precautions when hiring law enforcement is also important, because these people conduct searches. They conduct property searches and they conduct body searches. And why am I saying this? Because we know that a 2-year-old was just deported, U.S. citizen. A 4-year-old with stage 4 cancer, U.S. citizen, deported. A 7-year-old U.S. citizen, deported. A pregnant mother, deported. And all of them certainly had to undergo body searches. As my colleague from Vermont also recounted, ICE recently raided a wrong home in Oklahoma City. They stole money, they seized phones and laptops and other devices, and they forced a mother and her 3 little girls in their underwear outside. And they were also searched. So I don't think any of us would want anyone involved in the destruction of this Capitol and involved in an insurrection and possibly an alleged sex offender to be searching a woman, any woman, or little girls. So please support this amendment. Please support voting against having people who've tried to destroy this Capitol with having the authority to search women and little girls with impunity. Please vote for democracy. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my colleague from California for offering this amendment, which, like so many of the amendments that are being offered today, should not even be on our radar. Of course, 1,500 plus convicted criminals should also not have been pardoned on day one, simply because the president wants to whitewash what happened on January 6th. I actually am a new enough member. I was not here on January 6th, but I know that many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were. And in fact, many spoke out against the president at that time, recognizing that he incited a mob to invade the Capitol in order to try to overturn a lawful election. And I say lawful very intentionally because notwithstanding all of the allegations being the important word here, there has never been any proof that the election was in any way fraudulent. So, of course, over the course of 4 years, the inflamer-in-chief decides that, oh, let's rewrite history, and on day one pardons 1,500 plus. But the worst part about that is that he pardoned about 500 convicted criminals who violently assaulted law enforcement, our fine men and women of the Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police Department, who were simply here to defend the Capitol against violent insurrectionists, rioters, people who had tasers, who beat police officers, who caused heart attacks and strokes, who caused law enforcement officers to have significant surgeries and have to go ultimately on disability.
Will the gentleman yield for a question? Right here, Dan.
Yes, Mr. Swalwell.
Now, since any of these individuals were pardoned, these violent criminals were pardoned by the president, any chance that they reoffended? Any new reoffenses? And I'm just thinking of an Indiana incident where someone pulled a gun on a deputy, and thankfully the deputy shot and killed that individual. Has that happened?
Well, that's happened. Other crimes have happened.
Shocking.
By a number of these people. And
Who would have guessed?
who would have thought it? And especially when you have some of these convicted criminals who were convicted of seditious conspiracy, which is a charge so rarely brought that because of its heightened burden of proof and its heightened legal requirements, that you have to conspire to overthrow the government by force in order to be convicted of that. Now, you may say, oh, I'm sure it was some leftist judge that ultimately convicted him. Oh, no. It's our jury system. Our jury system where 12 individuals, 12 peers, unanimously had to vote to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. This is not a low standard. And yet, several were convicted of seditious conspiracy, but the president did not distinguish between any of them. Mr. Swalwell, I'd like to yield to you a question. If 1,500 people were convicted of violently invading the Capitol at the behest of Donald Trump, many of whom were acknowledged members of domestic violent extremist groups, is it more or less likely that they would answer the call for violence from a president who pardoned them than a president who had not pardoned them?
More likely, because those individuals would believe that they have a free pass, a green light, a permissive lane to commit violence because the dude that said what you did was okay, he's going to have your back again. And Dan, Mr. Goldman, do you think it's more likely that a guy who would pardon 1,500 people who committed violence in his name would also imprison 1,500 of his enemies?
Well, only if it's somebody who has already directed the Department of Justice to criminally investigate his political enemies for disagreeing with him. My time is up, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure Mr. Swalwell would like to take some more time so we can continue this colloquy.
The question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Was there someone else that sought recognition? The gentlelady is recognized.
I completely support this amendment. It is one of the most shameful acts of this president to issue pardons those first few days for over 1,000 rioters. And I get asked this a lot from my constituents. How is this possible? How is it possible that President Trump pardoned people who attacked and desecrated our Capitol, who violently attacked police officers? 140 officers assaulted that day, 5 of whom died as a result of their trauma. My constituents want to understand this. How is it possible that your colleagues across the aisle do not see how abhorrent this is, how outrageous this is, how absolutely un-American this is? And this bill appropriates $8 billion to ICE to hire personnel. And I think we want to be sure that we're hiring people for those positions that were not people who participated in the attack on this Capitol. And at least one of those pardoned January 6th insurrectionists was spotted impersonating an ICE agent here on Capitol Hill while he was harassing Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. And I just need to say once again, we cannot get the Speaker of the House to agree to hang up a plaque in honor of our officers who defended the Capitol on that day. So we have seen, as we've talked about here, a rash of bad actions from ICE agents over the past few months. Agents smashing windows of cars to arrest people for whom they didn't have a warrant, breaking down doors of homes, harassing U.S. citizens, even when they were informed that the police, the people that they were looking for weren't even there, that they had moved. We've seen them arresting innocent teenagers, even when they recognized that they were actually, in fact, looking for a different individual. So we already have concerns about what ICE is doing. And this seems like a very straightforward no, that of course, every single member of this committee would not want someone who participated in the January 6th insurrection to be eligible to work for ICE. And I was just brought to my attention that one of the folks who was convicted was an Indiana man, Anthony Vo, I think his name was. He crossed the border illegally to Canada and then was not granted asylum. So I think we want to make sure that people like this do not have an opportunity to work for the federal government. I know for me, I would not feel like ICE was in good hands with people like that. And
Will the gentlelady yield for a question?
I will.
I just want to make sure I understand what this bill is talking about. Is it true that the Department of Homeland Security is charged with keeping our homeland safe?
Yes.
And so would we want people convicted of invading the most sacred monument in our homeland to be then responsible for keeping our homeland safe? Is that what this bill prevents?
That's what this bill prevents, Mr. Goldman.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
I will yield, yes. Mr. Moskowitz.
I just want to even make it a little clearer.
Sure.
'Cause I just want some imagery, I think, because my colleagues across the aisle don't seem to be engaged. So this bill would prevent the J6 shaman, right? The guy who wore the,
That's right. With the big
ram-
headdress, is that
Yeah.
what you mean? Yeah.
This would prevent like Secretary Noem from hiring him in Homeland.
That's right.
And before you say like, oh, Jared, don't be ridiculous. Like she would never, I mean, she shot a puppy in the face. I mean, the shaman seems like fair game.
Agreed.
Okay, this bill would prevent that.
Yes.
Okay.
Move to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm thrilled to see that Mr. Van Drew is here because I think he is one of the honest debaters on your side who is engaged with us on a lot of spirited debates. And so I wanted to ask Mr. Van Drew, because earlier he did not speak when we put an amendment forward that said you can't deport an American citizen, and you guys voted to allow it. Mr. Van Drew, I know you think that's wrong. And if you want to be silent, I'm going to take your silence as you agreeing with me that that's wrong. Okay, so Mr. Van Drew's silent. I'm going to check it off that he agrees that deporting U.S. citizens is wrong.
The chair will note that the gentleman did respond.
I'll yield to you, Mr. Van Drew. Go ahead.
The gentleman did not seek recognition.
Okay. So, Mr. Van Drew, we also discussed and had an amendment that said firing veterans is wrong and you shouldn't do that. And you didn't speak up then. And I'm going to take your silence now as you agree firing veterans is wrong. So I'm going to put a check next to Mr. Van Drew being with us on that. We just talked about January 6 rioters not joining the Department of Homeland Security. And Mr. Van Drew, you're a good person. You're a dentist in your community. You stand with law enforcement. So you have not spoken up. So I'm going to take your silence to mean you agree with us that we should not hire January 6 rioters in the Department of Homeland Security. And Mr. Van Drew, we also said that it's probably wrong to deport a 4-year-old with cancer who is a U.S. citizen, and you didn't say anything, but again, I think you're a good person, so I'm going to take your silence to mean, Mr. Van Drew, that you agree with us that that is also wrong. And I'd yield to anyone else who has questions for Mr. Van Drew. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the adoption of the, The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Clearly, in the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it.
We would like to seek a recorded vote.
The gentleman seeks many seek a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa?
No.
Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes yes. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett?
Aye.
Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Swallow, you're not recorded. Mr. Swallow votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 15 ayes and 17 noes.
Amendment is not adopted. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Fox News. Oh, I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will report.
I apologize. I'm just trying to get you guys out, you know. You don't seem thrilled.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the
Without
committee.
objection, the amendment be considered as read. The gentleman from California reserves a point of order. The gentleman from Florida is recognized to explain his amendment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Fox News asked the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, the other day, would the president ever arrest a Supreme Court justice? Seems a pretty straightforward answer. She could have just said no, but she didn't answer the question. She left the door open. So I thought that this would be an opportunity for some bipartisanship to close the door on that possible question. And so I wrote a very simple amendment, Mr. Chairman. It reads, no funds made available in this title may be used for the arrest, detention, or criminal prosecution of any Supreme Court justice on the basis that that justice has ruled against the executive branch in any case or controversy before the justice. So it doesn't say if they committed a crime, because no one's above the law, of course. It just says they won't be arrested if they rule against the administration. This should seem to be very simple. It seemed to be you should want to take it, be clear. Caroline Leavitt couldn't be. This is your opportunity to clear that up, that we're not going to arrest, you know, Justice Thomas, even though he goes on planes and does stuff with Ginny, right? But we're not going to arrest him, right? We're not going to go arrest him. You should want to vote for that, right? You know, he goes on yachts and, you know, does all, we're not going to arrest him, right? You know, because we want to make sure that it's clear. So I just figured I'd give you the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. That's the amendment. I wave back. I yield back. I mean, unless you want to talk about it.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment. Gentleman from Georgia.
Yeah, even though it seems to be nonsensical, it's actually a very sensible amendment, which I support. Just last week, we had the Attorney General and the FBI to go out and arrest a sitting judge, a state court judge out of Milwaukee. Perp walked her to jail. They could have asked her to turn herself in. But the charges are dubious. She was just simply administering the affairs of her court, and they have charged her with preventing the apprehension of a alien that ICE wanted to deport out of her courtroom and courthouse. And because she took action to continue the operations of her courtroom and the rendition of justice in a manner that was suitable for the state courts, she has been charged with crime, and that was meant to send a message not just to state court judges, but to federal court judges, and indeed to Supreme Court justices. And so it's not outlandish to think that a president who is violating all of the norms would go so far as to arrest a justice who spoke out against him and who ruled against him. And so I think this is a very common sense amendment. And it is a no-brainer. It's not going to cost anybody anything to support this, to go on record and say that we do not support the arrest of a sitting Supreme Court justice. There's nothing wrong with this amendment. I would urge my colleagues to support it. I do, and vote yes, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Recorded vote being requested by the gentleman from Florida. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yeah,
Mr.
let us
Klein?
have one.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Nagoose? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes yes. Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett? Ms. Crockett votes yes.
We got plenty. Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 20 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Gentleman from California reserves point of order.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment be considered as read. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. This is a very simple amendment that is actually about public safety of everyone involved, ICE agents, as well as the community at large, as well as those that potentially are going to be apprehended by ICE. And simply, it would require that ICE identify themselves and ensure that they do not wear masks except if medically necessary or if necessary to preserve the integrity of undercover operations in order to use funds for civil ICE enforcement actions. With every day that passes in this administration, we are seeing more and more ICE officers rounding up people off the streets into vehicles. And honestly, some of them look like they are supposed to be my criminal defendants in court. It looks like people are getting robbed. It looks like people are about to endure a carjacking. And in fact, I have a video to describe what I'm talking about.
Shocking video showing the moment ICE agents smashed a car window and forcibly removed a man in New Bedford. 29-year-old Juan Francisco Mendez has no criminal record and was
went viral earlier this week after police say Johnson impersonated an ICE officer.
You got caught, Mo. Where you from? Mexico? You from Mexico?
Now, this is what we have going on in our country. The sad part is that honestly, both of them look like they could be part of the same team. And unfortunately, you have people in both of those situations. The first situation, when the officers were busting out their windows, to be clear, there was no record. There was no reason to go after the people that were in that car. And then in the second situation, you had someone that literally took their car keys, and you're talking about people sitting there in fear because they literally don't know if this is somebody who is authorized to do this. So this is about safety. And let me tell you about safety. Now, I know Lance Goodness running around here somewhere. Now, Lance Goodness from Texas like I am. Chip Roy is from Texas like I am. Any of us can tell y'all about how we do it in Texas. We carry. And when I say we, all of us. I'm licensed to carry, as well as I'm sure a number of my colleagues on that side of the aisle are licensed to carry. And essentially, we have a stand your ground law in the state of Texas. We have seen officers, police officers that have gone in under no-knock raids. This is legislation that I carried when I was on the state level, trying to make sure that I could keep law enforcement safe, because when you go into a home and you haven't identified yourself, it is the most dangerous time for law enforcement agents. And I know that we have some former law enforcement on this side of the aisle as well. In fact, I had a number of law enforcement agencies that were backing my no-knock bill because they understood how dangerous it was. So one of the things that we always do typically in criminal law before we can charge anybody with evading arrest or failing to ID is we have to make sure that people even know that it was law enforcement. When you have somebody that say does something like this, like busting my window out, you try that in Texas. It may not turn out too well. It needs to be that we are all on the same page and we say, you need to be properly identified as an ICE agent if we are going to fund what you are doing. As we are looking around, there are so many people that believe that their communities are now plagued with crime because they see ICE agents that are not clearly identified, and they are disappearing students on campus, on the sides of streets. They don't know what's going on. And honestly, if we're not even just talking about stand your ground, in a lot of states, if you see someone that is committing what you believe to be a heinous crime against somebody else, you're allowed to take action. We are talking about putting not only the people, which half of them are innocent in the first place, because we love to grab up some citizens wrongfully. We know it happened down in Florida. Y'all may not care because it was Florida, but it happened down in Florida where we had a U.S. citizen that was sitting in jail for 48 hours because of yet another mistake of ICE. In Milwaukee, we had 3 citizens, a toddler and his mother and the grandmother, that were detained and sent to an immigration detention center after they reportedly were overheard speaking Spanish. In short, what we don't want is to create even more issues, and that's what we're doing. I would never imagine, and I'm gonna be honest, I have never seen law enforcement. Now, I haven't had to deal with cases that involved ICE. I'm gonna be honest about that. But I have never seen a police officer, whether he was city or whether he was a county sheriff's deputy, do the kind of things that I've been seeing. Busting out windows, kicking down doors. And to be perfectly honest, if that's the operations of ICE, we probably need to work on that as well. But at the end of the day, if this is what they are going to do and how they are going to conduct themselves, I can tell you, I'm sorry, this is about safety. Sorry, I will yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Question occurs on the amendment from the gentlelady from Texas. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
I'd ask for a recorded vote.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt, Mr. Fry, Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin,
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler, Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren votes yes. Mr. Cohen, Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu, Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse, Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballot votes aye. Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove, Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman, Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. Gooden, you are not recorded. Mr. Gooden votes no.
Clerk report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 14 ayes and 20 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk report. Gentleman from Arizona reserves.
Amendment to the
Without
amendment.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment would prohibit funds in this section of the bill from being used to transport migrants to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I have long argued that the extrajudicial nature of holding prisoners in Guantanamo without due process is abhorrent and a stain on our national honor. I criticized President George W. Bush for this type of abuse during his presidency. In fact, I said on the House floor on June 21st, 2005, quote, "This assertion of the right to hold people forever with no specific evidence and no due process has not been asserted in an English-speaking country since before Magna Carta 800 years ago, until this president had the nerve to besmirch the good name of the United States by making such an assertion. This is not how America became the shining city on a hill, so admired by people the world over. No executive should be permitted the power to lock people up forever without ever having to prove their guilt. That is a power that I would trust to no man, no king, no dictator, and no president." End quote. 20 years later, another president, President Trump, wants to build on the ugly legacy of Guantanamo and begin using it as a detention center for migrants. We should not add insult to injury and hold even more people there offshore, illegally, and in secret. The horrific conditions, questionable legality, unlawful detention, and torture that has occurred on this base are well known. No one should be held there, and yet that is exactly what Trump tried to do. On January 29th, President Trump issued a memo to the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security directing the expansion of the Migrant Operations Center at Guantanamo Bay to, quote, "full capacity," unquote, which can accommodate up to 30,000 immigrants at once. Pursuant to the executive order, the Department of Defense rushed to put up nearly 200 tents in anticipation of holding migrants there. Fortunately, thus far, the tents have never been used. Instead, the Trump administration has detained a grand total of 400 migrants in the base's hard side facilities, costing American taxpayers over $40 million. There are regularly 5 staff on the base for every migrant that was detained there. Where is Elon Musk when you really need him? Talk about inefficient. Talk about a waste of taxpayer money. It is time to stop wasting money we don't have on projects we don't need. It is time to end this national embarrassment. Perhaps the administration sees the error of its ways. Reports indicate that in early March, the administration was reconsidering the plan, and by March 13th, the spokesman for the U.S. Southern Command confirmed that no migrants were currently being held at Guantanamo. I ask unanimous consent to include in the record this article from the Voice of America dated March 12th, 2025, entitled U.S. Clears Out Remaining Migrants from Guantanamo Bay.
Without objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to include in the record this article from the BBC dated April 17th, 2025, entitled Migrant Tents Removed from Guantanamo Bay Satellite Images Show.
Without objection.
This article states, quote, on 28 March, a group of 5 Democrat senators visited the base. In a statement, they said they were, quote, outraged by the scale and wastefulness of the Trump administration's misuse of our military, close quote, and described the camp as, quote, seemingly designed to undermine due process and evade legal scrutiny. Mr. Chairman, it was always a bad idea to hold people secretly in offshore prisons without due process. And now we have a chance to do something about it. We should not be wasting another penny holding migrants on this base. This amendment would ensure that we won't. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Roll call requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Ms. Kamlager? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman? Ms. Crockett?
Aye.
Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 19 no.
Amendment is not adopted. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Gentleman from New York is recognized. Or excuse me, the clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment and
Without
then
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment is designed to uphold the promises that our government has made to taxpayers in this country. And in this case, the taxpayers are undocumented immigrants who, in by some calculations, contribute nearly $10 billion a year in taxes. Now, obviously, they don't have Social Security numbers. So undocumented immigrants who want to comply with the law, who want to come to this country and work and build a life, perhaps they are seeking asylum and they are trying to comply with the law. And so they have obtained tax identification numbers so that they can pay income tax. The promise that they get under our laws, under 6103, is that the IRS will not divulge their personal information. However, this administration has completely upended and betrayed those promises by agreeing to share taxpayer information with our immigration services, with the Department of Homeland Security, so that they can use that information to potentially arrest them and deport them. Now, we may agree on some aspects of immigration policy, disagree. Certainly, I agree that those who are convicted criminals should be deported, that there's a process to seek asylum. We ought to be spending money on streamlining that process. But others may disagree, and I would disagree with you, I'm sure, on many of the provisions that you would like. But it seems to me that we can agree that promises made to undocumented immigrants about their taxpayer personal identification information so that they can pay income tax into the United States Treasury should be honored. That seems pretty straightforward. We are essentially asking people to voluntarily pay taxes simply with the promise that we won't use that taxpayer information to deport them. And yet, that is exactly what this administration has done. In fact, 3 IRS commissioners have resigned their posts since President Trump took office 100 days ago. 3! Largely because the Department of Homeland Security and this administration is violating the promises that the IRS made and what the law actually requires. The law to reveal taxpayer information is much stricter than other laws. Even when you're a prosecutor, you have to file a separate motion to obtain a separate order, almost akin to a search warrant, just to get taxpayer information. And here, the IRS, pursuant to an agreement with the Department of Homeland Security, is forced to give our immigration enforcement services taxpayer information. Now, maybe I understand my Republican colleagues do not care about promises that are made to induce people to actually pay into our coffers. I'm sure there's some explanation that they're undocumented immigrants, so they're effectively less than human and therefore should get no rights in this country, which of course is not the way our country works. But for a party that talks so much about reducing the deficit, it seems odd to me that you, the Republican Party, would want to engage in conduct that will inevitably lead to much less revenue from taxpayer payments. Maybe we can agree that we can lower the deficit by agreeing to this amendment so that undocumented immigrants can trust that their identification information will be kept private as they were promised. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The lady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you. I rise in strong support of this amendment, and I just want to add to the gentleman from New York's excellent description of what happens to revenue by saying one more thing, which is I think most Americans don't connect the taxes that undocumented immigrants pay, which, by the way, is very carefully tracked because either you have an ITIN number if you're undocumented and you're paying your federal taxes, or you have a Social Security number that doesn't match, and then it goes into what's called the Social Security Suspense Fund. So you can actually look at the total amount that undocumented immigrants are contributing into taxes and into programs that, by the way, they can never gain the benefits from. So they don't collect any benefit from contributing their federal taxes on Social Security or anything else. And they're sort of in a no-win situation because people are always saying they don't pay taxes. Not true. They do constantly, but lies keep being told about how undocumented immigrants don't pay taxes. They absolutely do. And they are then being essentially incentivized by the Trump administration to not pay taxes because they're going to use this data, this information to go after them. But the point I wanted to make was that I think a lot of people don't know that essentially the taxes that undocumented immigrants pay are a subsidy for US citizen Social Security benefits that are paid out. And so Social Security is financed in part by the taxes that undocumented immigrants pay and never collect on. And so just as one example, the estimate is $25.7 billion in Social Security taxes annually are paid by undocumented immigrants. Now, if you take that amount away, or if you follow through on Donald Trump's mass deportation plans, if he really were able to deport 11 million people, as some people in this committee seem to want to do, you would actually dramatically decrease Social Security's solvency. And so I wonder, Mr. Goldman, if part of the intent here is actually to decimate Social Security, because the more you can say that Social Security is insolvent, the more you can then cut Social Security benefits for US citizens and for people who have been paying into Social Security with the assurance that they're going to get a retirement benefit. And so to me, there's even a more dastardly notion to this, which goes along with the idea that the Trump administration has been shutting Social Security offices around the country. That's what they did in Washington State, in Seattle. They shut the regional Social Security office down. That's 200 employees who had to be farmed out to other places. Those folks actually service a 5-state area of Social Security offices. So that meant that all of a sudden there was nobody to take care of the websites, to do all of these different things. I feel like this attempt to use taxpayer data has two really horrific goals. One is to go after immigrants, obviously in the mass deportation scheme. The other is perhaps, just perhaps, to also reduce the amount of money that immigrants are paying into Social Security and to undermine the confidence of any taxpayer, frankly, who's paying in, who says, I don't want to share my data, which Mr. Chairman and I have long, I thought, shared this notion that our data should be protected, right, Mr. Chairman? But all of a sudden, it seems like maybe you want to co-sponsor this amendment, vote for this amendment, because to me, this is like we're allowing people to go after our data. And we've both taken on our own parties over the years on this question of privacy and privacy of our data. But this to me does feel like maybe part of this is decimate Social Security, which Elon Musk said was one of his top goals. This was the big one, the entitlement that they wanted to get rid of is Social Security. And this certainly would. Yes,
Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes.
For a question? So I just want to make sure I understand this. So undocumented immigrants pay Social Security tax, is that right?
That's correct.
And there's no assurance, of course, that they will ever get any of that money
No,
back.
they're actually not allowed to get money. They can't claim any benefits because they're not
Right.
eligible.
They would have to become eligible, which means some degree of documentation.
That's correct.
So here they are voluntarily paying it in and with no guarantee of getting it back. And that might, you're saying, reduce the possibility of other American citizens who've also paid into it from getting their benefits?
Exactly, because it's a subsidy to US citizens, to others who have paid into Social Security, are eligible to receive their benefits. They're getting subsidized by undocumented immigrants who are paying into Social Security with no ability to ever collect on those benefits. I think my time has expired. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman from California is
move
recognized.
to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, where's Kevin Kiley? I'm a little worried about him. We've been going since 2 o'clock. I think we've had Mr. Raskin, you could help me, probably 10 amendment votes? More? How many amendment votes have we had, guys? 15? Now, Mr. Chairman, your members have not spoken on anything, and we can take their silence as an admission that it's wrong to deport U.S. citizens and it's wrong to deport kids with cancer. But Mr. Kiley has missed every single vote that we've taken, and I think it's fair to do a welfare check on Mr. Kiley. He's tweeting. He's been tweeting during this hearing, but he's not voting. So I just, for the good of the committee, where's Kevin? Does anyone on your side know? Have you seen him? Is he in the room? Just a wave or like a hey? Proof of life for Kevin Kiley, because these are pretty important votes: deporting U.S. citizens, firing veterans, deporting kids with cancer. I would expect that my neighbor to the north would want to be here, but he hasn't voted on any of this. So if anyone has seen Kevin Kiley, hey, just tell him there's a hearing going on and his constituents want to know how he would vote on any of this. Maybe if he wants to tweet at me that he's okay, I would accept that. I'd yield.
Do you want to suggest that maybe Mr. Van Drew go look for Kevin Kiley?
So we don't know where Mr. Kiley is.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Yes.
I want to follow up for a moment on your sort of silence, what the silence of our Republican colleagues means. Because you are correct that we've been here since 2 o'clock and not a single Republican on this committee has spoken on any amendment, and they have uniformly and unanimously voted down every single amendment, including, as you mentioned, deporting U.S. citizens. Apparently, that is okay. But my question for you, though, is, our job in Congress here is to vote, right? Our job, we can say whatever you want to say, but ultimately, you are judged on your votes. So I guess my question to you is it better to say that their silence means that they agree with our amendments, or their vote against our amendments means that they disagree with all of them?
How would you know? I don't know. We could only know if they were here to defend it. So we'll let their constituents draw a conclusion. But Mr. Kiley, the reason I bring him up is under the Republican budget plan, the 32,000 people who receive coverage under the Affordable Care Act in Kevin Kiley's district would see their average premium go up by $3,000 a year. That's a 121% increase. And many families would face an even steeper consequence. A 60-year-old couple with a household income of $85,000 in Folsom, the heart of Mr. Kiley's district, would see their health insurance increase by $22,560 a year, a 312% increase in premiums. So with all seriousness, where's Kevin Kiley? He has missed every single vote. I stepped out to talk to my kids to miss, I think, maybe 1 or 2 amendment votes. That's fine. People have things come up, but he hasn't been here all day. So if you're his friends, go find him, or Kevin, just tweet at us and tell us you're okay. And with that, and maybe tell your constituents how you'd vote on these important amendments. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment offered by gentleman from New York. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Goldman? Mr. Moskowitz votes yes. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett? Ms. Crockett votes yes. Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Fitzgerald votes no.
Clerk will report. I've looked at this so many times, I know, without even like counting. We gotta find some check marks.
Mr. Chairman, there are 15 ayes and 20 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Lofgren, the gentlelady from California is recognized.
Yes, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. The gentleman from Arizona reserves.
Amendment to the amendment.
Without objection, the amendment be considered as read. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. This amendment would prohibit the use of funds to detain or remove agricultural workers unless they are a threat to public safety. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as the National Agricultural Workers Survey, or NAWS, somewhere between 50% to 70% of all farm workers in the United States are unauthorized immigrants. What that means is that approximately 1.5 to 2.1 million agricultural workers in the U.S. could be lost under a mass deportation effort that the Trump administration has promised. Now, let me just give you an example of what that would mean in my district. In 2022, in the 18th Congressional District of California, there were 1,800 farms on 1.6 million acres, nearly 3,500 ag producers, and tens of thousands of farm workers. What this means is that we have one of the most productive agricultural areas in the United States. In fact, if you had a salad today, chances are that the leafy greens in that salad came from the Salinas Valley. You know, allowing funds to be used for mass deportations of farm workers is going to drive up costs for American families, and it will increase our deficit. It would deprive agricultural businesses of critical labor, raise prices at the grocery store, and we expect those shelves to soon be empty of imported produce because of the tax, the import tax that has been imposed. It would reduce tax revenue, and it has been estimated by the American Immigration Council that this could cost taxpayers up to $315 billion. Now, with the Republican Party lining up yet another tax cut for billionaires and corporations, working families are going to have to pay the cost. Instead of funding the deportation of these farm workers, a more rational and logical option would be to stabilize the agricultural sector by fixing our broken employment system. And the House has tried to do that. My bill, introduced with bipartisan co-sponsors, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, has passed the House of Representatives with strong bipartisan support, first in the 116th Congress and then in the 117th Congress. This program, I would remind you, would allow for agricultural workers in the United States to get a special agricultural worker card. And then later, if they chose, they could also apply to become legal permanent residents. Background checks, obviously, and strict criminal national security bars would apply. I just think, you know, for the farm workers who are in my district, it is hard work. And in a way, I think it's really not fair that these individuals are out there in the fields in the worst climate, in the heat, and looking over their shoulder. That's their perspective. But I want to address my colleagues on the other side of the aisle on what it means for other people, what it means to America writ large. If we have a food shortage in this country, it'll be because we don't act on something like this. I will say that throughout COVID, we never ran out of food because the farm workers kept showing up and the farmers kept showing up. If we disrupt that fine pattern of service in the farms of America by deportations, we will be very sorry. I promise you this, we will regret this. We need to, and we will be reintroducing the Farm Workforce Modernization Act next week with bipartisan support. And while that bill is working its way through the Congress, we ought to take steps to prevent the deportation of farm workers. If we do not do that, there'll be a price to pay, a heavy price to pay in the agricultural sector. So I urge adoption of this amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman from New York.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. I very much support this amendment from my colleague from California, who comes from a state, as we know, that is vital to our agricultural development. And I often hear from some of our colleagues in Congress this desire to make things in America. And I guess I have a couple of questions for my colleague, if she would indulge me. We're talking about agricultural workers who work on American farms. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And I think what you said, and the data really backs this up, is American farms are extremely reliant on migrant workers, many of whom do not have documentation. Is that right?
That is correct. At least half of the farm workers in America lack documentation. It could be up to 70%. We don't know for sure, but it is a majority.
And I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but I certainly am under the impression that our Republican colleagues represent a lot of districts that have a lot of farmland. Is that right?
Well, there are representatives on both sides of the aisle who have agricultural areas, but certainly if you look at a map and the red areas on that map, there's a lot of ag in those.
Yeah, there certainly is a lot of agriculture. So it would seem to me that if we take this issue to its logical conclusion, that numerous of our Republican colleagues have constituents that will be very negatively impacted by deporting agricultural workers. Is that fair to say?
I would say not only will the employers in their districts be negatively impacted, but as food disappears from groceries, every American will feel the impact of this.
Certainly. So there will be less produced, which of course, based on basic economic supply and demand, will mean that prices will go up. Now, I assume that there's the possibility, since we're trying to reduce our trade deficits, even though I don't think our president understands what that means, but presumably we could import enough agricultural produce to make up for the reduction in the production here. Is that right?
Well, there's a couple of issues with that. First, we've imposed tariffs on ag producers, so that will mean higher grocery prices, but we've also reduced the inspection of food. And so right now, there's a very robust inspection system so that food produced outside the United States, we know is safe when imported. So with those inspectors gone, there will be higher prices and riskier produce as a result of this.
Right, so safety as well as actual prices. But I just want to get back to what you mentioned about the tariffs for a second, because I hear from our president that the foreign countries are going to pay for the tariffs. But you said that the prices would go up. Can you explain why that is?
Well, it's an import tax. It's not, I mean, I think we ought to say what it is. Tariff is confusing. It's a tax on imports. And for the most part, that will be passed along to the people who are purchasing those imports, whether it's toys at this Christmas, and it's going to be a lot less toys in America, or whether it is bananas. We don't produce bananas in this country, but whether it's produce, whether it's meat, the price of meat is going through the roof already. When I go to the grocery store, as I did over the weekend, it's just shocking, the increase in price in meat. And we do import lamb, for example, from New Zealand, and beef from Australia. That's going to be even higher. And then, of course, if we reduce the capacity to produce in the United States by deporting the workforce, this is not a pretty picture for American consumers.
Right, so we'll have less produce here that will raise prices, and it's actually the consumer that pays the tariff tax. It's not the federal government. That is a complete lie. So prices will go up on imported goods, and perhaps that explains why, in part, grocery prices have gone up nearly 3% since Donald Trump took office. Egg prices are at a high of more than $6 per dozen on average. So clearly, we're gonna jam the working American from both ends if our agricultural workers are deported. But I just want to go, before we finish up here, I saw an article today where, and perhaps it was from a clip, that the president, in response to a question about what will happen to Christmas presents if these tariffs continue, because Christmas presents are ordered around now in advance of Christmas. What's going to happen to Christmas? And the president said that what would happen is that instead of kids getting 30 dolls per kid, that they would only get 2 dolls per kid. Ms. Lofgren, is it your understanding from talking to your constituents that their children get 30 dolls per year?
Well, the president's a billionaire, so maybe his grandchildren get that amount of toys, but most kids do not, and certainly my grandchildren do not.
That's what I thought.
yield back.
I yield back.
Someone yields back. Question occurs on the,
I have a UC.
gentlelady, make a request.
Thank you so much. This is a time.com article that says, in fight with Bezos, White House calls Amazon showing tariffs cost a hostile act.
Without objection. Question occurs on the amendment offered by gentlelady, Ms. Lofgren, the gentlelady from California. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no? No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Like a recorded vote, please.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett?
Aye.
Ms. Crockett votes aye. Ms. Hageman, you are not recorded. Ms. Hageman votes no. Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Fry votes no.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 15 ayes and 19 noes.
Amendment is not adopted. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment.
Without
and the-
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Gentleman can describe his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer my amendment, which would allow funds to be used to provide lawyers for unaccompanied immigrant children. This amendment just makes sense. We do not allow children to represent themselves in any other legal proceedings. An immigration court should be no different. In these cases, the government is represented by a lawyer. How can we expect kids without lawyers to assess their own eligibility for humanitarian relief, prepare their own cases, and advocate for themselves during an adversarial hearing? I mean, we're talking about a 2-year-old. We expect toddlers to clutch a teddy bear or swing on a playground, but we don't expect them to act as lawyers representing themselves. It is absurd to require them to represent themselves in a complex legal proceeding or in any legal proceeding for that matter. The data bears this out. Unaccompanied children without lawyers are almost 100 times less likely to have a good outcome than unaccompanied children who have lawyers. Plus, providing representation leads to an orderly judicial process, which is sorely needed in our backlogged immigration courts. 98% of children with attorneys appeared for their court dates. And according to the National Association of Immigration Judges, it helps them get through their cases. These judges wrote that they conduct proceedings more expeditiously and resolve cases more quickly when children are represented by attorneys. And I thought we all agreed that we don't want immigrants stuck in limbo for years without a judge telling them either way they can stay or they must leave. Plus, there has been long-standing bipartisan support for efforts to provide legal counsel to unaccompanied children, including in the Homeland Security Act of 2002 and the Victims Protection Act of 2008. This is because Congress has realized for years that legal representation is absolutely essential to ensure that children have meaningful access to asylum and other protections. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm strongly in support of this bill. Having worked for years trying to provide representation for folks in the immigration system, the plight of children has always been top of mind. Not only are the children unable to represent themselves in the complex immigration system, but it does a real disservice to our immigration judges. What are they supposed to do when faced with a toddler, with an infant, someone who is completely unable to represent themselves? So it is not just the benefit of the particular individual subject to our immigration laws, but also to make sure that our courts are able to effectuate justice. So I strongly support this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yield. Would the gentlewoman yield?
Happy to yield to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I also strongly support this amendment. In fact, today, Representative Norma Torres, Robert Garcia, and I introduced a bill called the Fairness to Freedom Act that would provide legal counsel for immigrants who are detained. And I think most Americans don't know that you are not entitled to provided legal counsel when you are an immigrant in the civil immigration detention system. You can have one, but you have to be able to afford one. You have to be able to find one. And there's decades of research that shows that immigrants with representation are 10 times more likely to obtain relief from deportation than those without, and that detained immigrants with representation are 3.5 times more likely to be granted bond, enabling their release from detention. And what the Trump administration is doing right now is taking the very bipartisan funds that you mentioned, Mr. Johnson, that had been allocated to provide attorneys for kids and decimating those funds. They're slashing those funds. And so in my district, we have a very important organization called Kids in Need of Defense, KIND. And it's a nonprofit, and it represents kids in court. It does what Ms. Scanlon probably was doing as well. And they are closing their entire office because of Trump's elimination of funding that Congress has historically authorized. So that means that 250 kids, just represented by that organization alone, have just lost their lawyer. And nationwide, it's 26,000 kids that have lost their attorneys because of these funds that used to be bipartisan that have now been slashed by the Trump administration. So how are kids supposed to defend themselves? How are they supposed to represent themselves in court? And in fact, what's happening is they're not. And you can see even with the US citizen kids that were deported, there was no due process there. There were no attorneys to advocate for them. And so I just think that this is a very important amendment, and I thank the gentleman from Georgia for offering it, and I'm strongly in support. I yield back.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
You just raised an important point about what a difference representation makes when someone has legal rights to be enforced, when there's an attempt to have compliance with our laws. We've heard the president in recent days say that he can't provide due process to all of the people who he's trying to deport because that would take forever. Well, justice may not always be as swift as we like, but democracy, its inconveniences are far outweighed by its benefits. Democracy versus efficiency, we always should come down on the side of democracy. Dictatorships are efficient, but they're also deadly, corrupt, and unfair. So I think this is a situation where Mr. Johnson's amendment is extremely well taken, and I heartily support it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Moves to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
This is an excellent amendment that really should be above and separate from any partisanship. I think we can all agree that children have little to no control, certainly young children have no control over the life that they're born into or the direction that their parents, loved ones, or whoever takes care of them has to direct them towards. And to withdraw funding for lawyers who can help a young child, doesn't speak our language, doesn't understand the law, obviously. Most Americans don't understand our immigration law. To wade through an incredibly scary process would seem to be the kind of compassionate, empathetic thing that every American can get around. We all have children. There are many children, and certainly we recognize that they are not able to fend for themselves, especially in a legal proceeding in a different language. And so this amendment, I think, should be supported by everyone who has basic humanity to care about children. Because I think it's clear, if you care about children, you would want to make sure that a child does not have to, an unaccompanied child does not have to go through a court process alone. And in fact, I know that this is bipartisan because I introduced one of the rare bipartisan immigration bills in the last Congress, and look forward to doing it again this Congress, that is called the Children's Court Act, which creates a separate court solely focused on children. And it would not only have attorneys for these children, but it would have judges who are trained to deal with the various different issues that come with unaccompanied children going through immigration proceedings, which of course, as I know my Republican colleagues know, includes child trafficking and other smuggling. And in fact, I have heard over and over and over again over the last couple of years, my Republican colleagues lambasting the Biden administration for not knowing where children were who crossed over the border. So I know you care about that, because I know you wouldn't just use children as a political pawn and a partisan weapon, and that you do care very much about children. And so since this is a bipartisan issue, and we should all be able to agree that innocent children, unaccompanied or otherwise, deserve a special treatment, since they certainly did not make any of the decisions that arrived there. And since we know that child trafficking is such a huge problem in our immigration system, that having trained lawyers and judges who can identify trafficking would be very helpful to our country and to humanity at large. And so I very strongly support this amendment, and I hope that we can find some common ground here. And in just my last minute, I wanted to follow up with my colleague from Pennsylvania, who has left. Okay. I'll come back to her, and I'll yield to my friend from Texas.
Thank you so much. Really quickly, I think this is one of those issues that really perplexes so many Democrats. And when I say Democrats, I'm not just talking about the elected. We have a party that continuously goes out and says that they are the voice of unborn fetuses. But when it comes to an actual living child who needs an advocate, you are okay with no one speaking up for that baby, a baby that actually exists and unfortunately is having to exist in a world in which they may not understand the language whatsoever. So I just ask you, if you want to be a voice and an advocate for an unborn fetus, then I ask that you care about the fetus when it arrives, regardless of the language that it speaks or the country that it comes from, and you be okay with speaking up for them as well. And I will yield back to the gentleman from New York.
Time has expired. Question occurs on the amendment offered by gentleman from Georgia. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The court of vote requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy, Mr. Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden. Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew. Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels. Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley. Mr. Kiley votes no. Ms. Hageman. Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee. Mr. Hunt. Mr. Fry. Mr. Grothman. Mr. Knott. Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder. Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner. Mr. Raskin.
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler.
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren. Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell. Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu. Ms. Jayapal. Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa. Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse. Ms. McBath. Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross. Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant. Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove. Mr. Moskowitz. Mr. Goldman.
Aye.
Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett.
Aye.
Ms. Crockett votes aye. Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Knott votes no.
Clerk report.
We're coming back. That's a bat. We're down by 26.
Yeah, that's all this stuff.
I've got some questions.
Oh, shit.
Mr. Chairman, there are 14 ayes and 18 noes.
It is not agreed to. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Gentleman from Arizona, California, reserves.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a
Without objection, the
substitute.
amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from California is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my amendment plainly says, let's keep classified information out of the signal chat. But, Mr. Chairman, I did earlier note that our colleague, Mr. Kiley, was not present during any of the votes, and he's here now, and I think that's important. And because I did call him out, it's only fair if I ask him how he would have voted on the votes he missed. And so I would like to know, Mr. Kiley, if you would like to tell us how you would have voted on banning the deportation of U.S. citizens. I think your constituents should know how you would have voted on that. We also voted on prohibiting the hiring of January 6 rioters. Mr. Kiley, you weren't here for that vote, and now I'm offering you the opportunity to speak. I'd yield to you on that. Mr. Kiley, we also voted and discussed whether the DOJ should be able to fire veterans. And if you want to stand up for your veterans in your district, I would yield to you right now to stand up for the veterans in your district. We also talked about whether kids with cancer who are U.S. citizens, particularly a 4-year-old who was recently deported, should have been deported. And Mr. Kiley, again, you're here now. You didn't vote on anything related to that, but I would yield to you. And if you don't want to discuss this, I understand, but we would just take it as an admission that you support all of that. And I think that's how your constituents would interpret that. Mr. Goldman, do you have any questions?
Well, I thank you for yielding to my friend from California. I want to go back just for a second to the amendment that you just introduced, because Signal is a very common form of communication. It's encrypted, and I guess I just, why is it so bad to share classified information that would actually subject someone to criminal penalties for its unlawful and knowing disclosure? Why is it, I don't understand, but it's encrypted, so why is it bad to do that? What is the point of this amendment?
Well, Mr. Goldman, let's start our own little group chat. Mr. Moskowitz, welcome to the group chat. What do you think? No classified, please.
No, I think some of the things that were in that Signal chat make excellent pieces of clothing.
Like pound, fire,
Like my
flag,
tie.
fist, fire,
I
flag.
gotta get the chairman this tie. Right, get it in the rotation. I know you love yellow. You love yellow. Red sometimes. Sometimes red.
But Mr. Moskowitz and Mr. Goldman, anyone else who wants to join the Signal group chat,
The report.
I appreciate, so I appreciate Mr. Hegseth's commitment to transparency by like putting war plans in a group chat. But Ms. Crockett, what do you think about, should we ban classified information from being discussed in a Signal group chat?
We absolutely should, especially with your significant others or when we have the reporters in the room that are going to report out. And thank God for the good reporters. You know, thank God we still have the First Amendment and some people that understand what it is to do true reporting. Because honestly, if this administration had their way, I'm sure that reporter would not even be allowed to report on this mishap. But more importantly, as I was stating earlier today, this isn't just about whether or not we as Americans are going to be safe, because clearly we don't care. But I mean, we are talking about our allies. Our allies are not going to want to share stuff with us when all we doing is putting it in a group chat with the brother-in-law, the wife, and everybody else.
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it was reported that the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth, installed a makeup room in the Pentagon. And I was just wondering if you had any insight based on things that get discussed in the chat, if you were aware of what foundation or what cover-up he used.
Yeah. He tried to conceal that story, but it got out.
Conceal.
Oh, he uses
He used
concealer?
concealer?
He uses concealer?
He did.
Oh,
Okay.
wait, hold on. Go back to this for a second. I'm not following this. The Secretary of Defense has a makeup room?
Yes.
Did he use government funds to create that makeup room?
It's unclear. I'm just saying in that room is where he does the concealer and the cover-up.
I actually don't have any problem with anybody that needs to get their makeup,
If he wants that, he should have that. That's okay.
especially if they want to wear their lashes.
I was going to say, do you think Mr. Hegseth has special
I
lashes?
forget who has the time, but whoever has it, it has expired. Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got an amendment at the desk.
We're still on.
Oh, we're still there. I yield back.
You want to offer a different amendment, is that correct? Okay. Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized. Oh, I'm sorry. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Yeah, the gentleman from Arizona reserves point of order. The clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a
Without
substitute.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized to explain the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, this is a very important amendment. The
Every amendment's been
administration.
important and everyone's been simple, so keep. we
Yeah,
got that
that's
on
what we've
every
been
single
trying to point out, but I don't know, you all aren't, you're sitting on your hands over there. This administration's immigration policies are extraordinarily harmful and traumatizing, and the bill would increase that harm immensely, giving ICE a $45 billion slush fund for detention. Just to put that into context, ICE's annual budget for immigration detention is less than 3.5 billion. So this is a massive increase. And the increase alone is bad, but I just want to point out something very important, which is that the policy changes that the majority is trying to slip into their so-called funding bill are even worse. So my amendment would strike the provision that allows for families to be detained indefinitely. This provision would overturn the Flores settlement agreement, which has helped protect children in government custody for nearly 30 years. The Flores settlement agreement's principal purpose is to ensure that children are released from immigration detention as quickly as possible, recognizing the harm to children. Children in the custody of the DHS have to be placed in the, quote, least restrictive setting, and they are not allowed to be detained for more than 20 days. But this bill actually makes a very important policy change, and it gets rid of that requirement. It allows families to be detained throughout their immigration proceedings through their removal if they're ordered removal. But with the immigration court backlog, that means that families could be stuck in detention for years. Now, family detention has historically been used only for arriving families. But now Trump is incarcerating families who have already been living in our communities as friends and neighbors for years. One of the youngest children being detained is only 1 year old. 1 year old child being put into detention. That is unacceptable, especially considering that much of the families detained under this provision and much of the new money provided for immigration detention is going to go straight to private for-profit prison companies. For-profit, privately owned prison companies are incentivized to make as much money as possible, often at the expense of the health and protection of individuals forced into their care. Private immigration detention facilities lack necessary oversight. They're often unsafe, and time again, that has led to a lack of sufficient healthcare and resources for detained individuals. Some of the most egregious abuses that we hear about of immigrants happen in detention facilities that are run by these for-profit private companies. Unnecessary medical interventions, forced labor, abuse of solitary confinement, and intimidation have run rampant. You might remember a case in Georgia, Mr. Johnson was with me when we went to visit, where immigrant women were being forced into sterilization procedures. Experts hired by the DHS office, that detention center, by the way, we were able to shut down thanks to our advocacy. Experts hired by the DHS Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, an office that the Trump administration closed without any congressional input or consent, conducted secret inspections of these detention facilities. Their investigation contains over 1,600 pages detailing conditions in these facilities, which they describe as, quote, barbaric and negligent. Private prison companies owe their first duty to their shareholders, not to the people they detain. They prioritize profits over people and care, and that is clear from a recent report in which medical experts determined that 95% of in-custody deaths that ICE reported between 2017 and 2021 were actually preventable. And of the 15 immigration detention centers with the highest number of deaths during this period, 13 are run by private prison companies, including a facility near my district, the GEO-run Northwest ICE Processing Center. I'm sure it's a total coincidence, but in 2024, GEO Group's PAC gave nearly $4 million to Republican campaign groups. And they're poised to make hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money from the bill's detention expansion. The Flores settlement agreement has guided our government's policies for detaining children for over a quarter of a century. And I want to be clear about what it looks like for kids before. When the Flores case was filed in 1985, children were held in indefinite detention in poor conditions without access to basic medical treatment. They were handcuffed, they were strip searched, subjected to body cavity searches, and required to sleep in areas and share bathrooms with adults that they didn't know. I can't imagine that that's something that anyone on this committee would want, and I would ask for the support of our Republican colleagues to prevent the overturning of Flores. I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I wholeheartedly endorse Representative Jayapal's amendment. Anyone who has worked with kids who've been caught in the immigration system, anyone who has met children who've been held even briefly in a detention center, know how much damage that does to these children, lifelong trauma. We've heard testimony before this committee in the past when there were efforts to detain children in violation of the Flores Agreement. So we can just go back to this committee's own records and testimony from Homeland Security officials. This is not something that the United States of America should ever be a party to. And so I would urge adoption of this amendment.
Would the gentlelady yield?
Yes.
I just have a question. I'm wondering if you think that everyone on the committee has actually read this bill, because this is a policy provision that's being slipped in as, as part of a funding bill. And I'm just curious whether you think our colleagues on the other side have read. I mean, none of them are talking tonight. Otherwise, I would yield to anybody on the other side to answer that question.
That sounds like it could be problematic on the Senate side with the bird rule.
Well, exactly right. I think that there's a really important question about what happens in the Senate, but I would just urge I can't believe any of my colleagues on the other side would want to detain kids. I don't know if anyone over there wants to respond. Doesn't seem like anybody is talking tonight.
I think
Mr. Van Drew is looking like he really wants to, but he is trying to sit on his hands. Mr. Van Drew,
Van
please.
Drew has never stayed this quiet for this long.
No, I mean, well, I want to come back to just the serious question of whether you all think that kids should be detained, because the Flores Agreement has existed for decades, and it existed specifically because we had kids who were being handcuffed and strip searched and subjected to body cavity searches and required to sleep in areas and share bathrooms with adults that they didn't know. And I'm thinking that, because I'm the eternal optimist, that maybe some of you over there don't want to vote for that and would vote with me on my amendment to make sure that we do not overturn the Flores Amendment in this, and that we actually preserve this important agreement. I don't know, Ms. Scanlon, it's your time, but I'll yield back to you. But I just, I don't know if there's any other way to get people over there to answer the question about whether they've actually read the bill.
Well, and I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what is the Flores Agreement. The Flores Agreement came out of a lawsuit about what was appropriate treatment for children.
That's right.
And it was a way of the U.S. dealing with the fact that the treatment that was being afforded to children before the Flores Agreement was unconstitutional, was a serious violation of not just their rights, but of their physical and mental health. I mean, the testimony that we've heard about children being held in inappropriate situations that are not appropriate for anyone, but much less a child. Again, it is just not something that I think the United States of America should be party to.
Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes.
Because there's an additional problem on top of this, which I think Ms. Jayapal very incisively got to, which is that by increasing the budget for immigration detention, I think you said from 3.5 billion to 45 billion, what is clear is our government does not have anywhere close to enough prison beds to use all that money. So that money designated for immigration detention of children is going to be outsourced to private prisons. So children are going to be indefinitely imprisoned in private prisons built for profit with substandard conditions, certainly not at all prepared for children or organized and arranged and oriented for children. And so we have so many multiple levels of problems here with this bill that this amendment would solve, which I think is very important for us to consider. I yield back.
Mr. Chair.
Time of the
My time expired.
gentlelady. Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
I move to strike the last word. I yield to my colleague from Pennsylvania. I'm just getting tired. Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to note, I think Mr. Goldman has raised a really interesting point. To the extent that this billion and billion of dollars of slush fund then becomes available to fund private prisons through companies like GEO, isn't this another instance where we may have to start monitoring our colleagues' stock purchases? Because I think I recall that once these executive orders started going into effect, we started seeing more stock purchases by our colleagues across the aisle of GEO and these other.
Yeah, and then another one, if I may
Yes.
request the time, is Palantir,
Mm.
which is a large tech company that was started by some of the supporters of the president who are close with other billionaires who've been put in the administration and clearly are advising the president on just about everything. And a certain member of the Republican Party from Georgia purchased Palantir stock. And as I understand the fact pattern, I could be wrong. That's why we have due process, because I would not be the one who would determine whether this is right or wrong. A couple weeks after making this purchase, this Palantir company entered into a $30 billion agreement with the Department of Homeland Security. This Republican member from Georgia sits on the Homeland Security Committee, which is the committee that oversees the Department of Homeland Security, which entered into this $30 billion. My understanding is that last check, that stock had increased by 48% since that deal was announced. And so since we have a slush fund going from 3.5 billion to 45 billion that will almost all go to private prisons, certainly this is something we would need a strong inspector general to oversee, right? To make sure that the Department of Homeland Security is not procuring that money in any wasteful, fraudulent, or abusive way. Is that your view as well, Ms. Scanlon?
Absolutely. I mean, the combination of the possibility that the money would go to those kind of private interests that have been so, making all those donations to the president and his inaugural fund and everything, or funding more placements in El Salvador or other inhumane prisons. I think for all those reasons, we should be cutting off this funding.
And may I ask another question? You mentioned the funding for the El Salvador prisons. I assume that you're referring to the fact that this administration is using taxpayer money to pay for El Salvador to house undocumented immigrants who were removed from our country without any court appearance and without any due process. And one of them, as we all know, has gotten a lot of attention, is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The reason he's gotten a lot of attention is because there was a withholding order on his deportation order that specifically said he could not be deported to El Salvador because there was a legitimate fear of persecution if he were sent to El Salvador. And he was sent there. My understanding is the administration admitted that he was sent there in error. I think they called it a mistake, quote unquote. And the courts all the way up to the Supreme Court have ruled that it was a violation of the fundamental right to due process. And the Supreme Court said that the administration must facilitate his return. And Ms. Scanlon, my question for you, since you mentioned the payment, the taxpayer money that is going to pay for Mr. Abrego Garcia to stay there, is would it qualify in your view to facilitate if the administration told El Salvador that they would not pay for Mr. Abrego Garcia to stay there anymore?
That would seem to make sense, and it would certainly be consistent with the reporting we're seeing that it's not consistent with the conditions that even the El Salvador government had agreed to in that case. So I thank the gentlelady for the time.
Gentlelady's time has
I yield back.
expired. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word. I would like to continue to engage in this questioning. And I have a question for the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania. You know, in California, there are actually instances where dozens, maybe even hundreds of unaccompanied minors are in detention centers. And in fact, you know, we have been told, although the federal government is being very evasive in allowing us access, but we have been told that they've been trying to force cities, my city, to continue to hold these young children. And I don't believe they have been provided access to representation. Welfare checks are not being allowed. There's no kind of adult supervision of these young children. And so I was just wondering, concerned that this administration is trying to force cities and states into collusion with it, with this illegal, unconstitutional, and dangerous behavior, especially when we're talking about young children. And can you talk about, you know, how really disastrous this would be for the country, and why supporting your kind of amendment would allow folks to stand up to what this administration is doing when it comes to young children? And I'm so curious about this because in the first term of this administration, they seem to not want to continue to show images of children in cages, and yet they are still doing that to young children, but they don't want anyone to talk about it.
You know, I think we've talked quite a bit about what happens when you are detaining children, when you're not providing them with the appropriate supports, mental health supports, food, clothing, and emotional support. I mean, it's the kind of thing that the International Treaty on the Rights of the Child, which almost every nation in the world has affirmed except for the United States. It's the kind of thing that is designed to prevent, so that we are not damaging children who aren't able to fend for themselves.
Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Washington. The question, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No.
Recorded vote, Mr. Chairman.
Recorded vote has been requested. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Mr. Kiley votes no. Ms. Hageman? Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes yes. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Crockett, you are not recorded. Ms. Crockett votes yes. Mr. Correa, you are recorded as aye. Mr. Issa, you are not recorded. Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Nels votes no.
Excuse me, clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 16 ayes and 21 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Who's next?
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk, number 24.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from Arizona.
Amendment to the amendment in the
Without
nature of.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from California is recognized to explain it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me begin by thanking all the veterans in this committee for their service to our country. This amendment deals with deported veterans.
Committee will come to order. Gentleman from California is recognized. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment deals with deported veterans. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to go south of the border to visit with a colony of deported veterans. These are formerly green card holders that served our nation honorably, were discharged with honor, and for some reason or another, their green card status was removed. I remember meeting one young man, probably in his late 20s, told me his story about serving in Afghanistan, numerous tours, a lot of firefights, saw a lot of bad stuff. Told me one day he woke up and he was choking his wife. Of course, he was convicted of aggravated assault. His green card was taken away and he was summarily deported. My amendment is simple. Essentially, today ICE is supposed to consider a veteran's service history when making a removal decision. Recent GAO study found that they failed to do so. So what my amendment will do is make sure ICE and/or immigrant judge do consider a veteran's length of service, awards, honors, disability, or health status related to their military service. And of course, their family and community ties before they are removed. And I gotta point out to, if I can have your attention here, a lot of the times when these immigrants are actually recruited by their recruiting officers, they are promised automatic citizenship. And of course, no such thing happens. And so when these individuals get into trouble, their green cards are removed. Today, about 45,000 immigrants serve in our active armed forces. These individuals, when they get out, honorably discharged, are still not citizens. All I'm asking is when they get in trouble, that they be given the courtesy of due process, that their service to this great country be considered and be part of the judgment, so to speak, upon their status in this country. We can do better for our immigrants. And by the way, it's not all that bad. These immigrants, these deported citizens, since they were honorably discharged they have earned the right to be buried in a VA national cemetery. So their bodies can actually be brought back to the U.S. and buried in a national cemetery. Guess that's a consolation prize? Folks, I ask you, please look at this amendment. Let's do the right thing for our veterans. I ask you to vote aye on this amendment. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Question occurs on the amendment from the gentleman from California. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Record a vote request, the clerk will call.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Isa? Mr. Isa votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Gooden votes no. Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Mr. Kiley votes no. Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes no. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Onder? Mr. Onder votes no. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes no. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill votes no. Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes no. Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Swallow? Mr. Swallow votes aye. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes aye. Ms. Ross? Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Ballant? Ms. Ballant votes aye. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes aye. Ms. Kamlager-Dove? Ms. Kamlager-Dove votes aye. Mr. Moskowitz? Mr. Moskowitz votes aye. Mr. Goldman? Mr. Goldman votes aye. Ms. Crockett? Ms. Crockett votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 16 ayes and 21 noes.
The amendment is not agreed to.
I'll take one.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.